Please be seated. Some of you may know, but I'd like to inform everyone this morning, I am wealthy. I am fabulously wealthy, living like a king. No, it was not the lottery. I have a nice home nearby, and its cabinets and refrigerators, yes, there are 2 refrigerators, are full of food. Fresh, clean water pours from its taps. I have all of the medical care that I need, and a car, and plenty of clothing, and the list goes on. Now, before you think that you're paying me too well, let me explain. I have visited people in remote parts of East Africa and Haiti who have none of these things. Not one. To illustrate, I'll tell you about Stephen. He lived in a refugee camp in the hills above the Nile River, a refugee camp, barely within Uganda on the Sudanese border. The people there were more remote and desperate than the ones in the camp where I was staying on the edge of a small town. My companions were a fellow seminarian, his wife, the manager of the orphanage where we were working, and the dean of a seminary of the Episcopal Church of Sudan. Now, the seminary was a collection of mud huts with wooden chairs, and that entire diocese was in exile. So at this other refugee camp, we sat in a church, which was a big rectangle that had crude benches, mud walls that went up about halfway, and a grass roof. Everyone was either pressed under the roof or they were pressed up to the dirt walls. The priest in that camp told us about Stephen. His parents were killed in the war in Sudan. He'd been living with his aunt and uncle in the camp, and they'd been able to come up with a little bit of money to pay for him to eat and be educated. But the uncle died, and Stephen would have to strike out on his own. He didn't know his birth date, but he seemed to be 12 or 13. Even in a refugee camp, he had become homeless. The priest said that he was the best student in the school, and he asked if the 3 Americans could send help from the United States. We said that we would make every effort. When it was time to go back to our camp, we got in the back of the pickup. As it started to move, the people rushed in, pressing against the moving truck. Their arms were raised and they were begging to go anyplace else, because someplace must be better than where they were. The dean and the orphanage manager reached out and picked up Stephen and plopped him in the bed of the truck. Stephen arrived at the orphanage wearing all of his possessions, a t-shirt, a pair of pants, and his report card in his pocket. I asked how much it would cost to pay for Stephen's expenses and tuition at the orphanage. Even for a seminarian who wasn't earning any money, it was a small commitment, and I made it, because even then, I was fabulously wealthy. Jesus' teaching about wealth, which we heard this morning, has always confused me. His teaching a few weeks ago about selling possessions and giving to the poor has always worried me. And the teaching we heard about 2 weeks ago about hating your relatives, well, that one just plain scares me. But I think I'm starting to figure it out. And Clay Glenn helped. At the last meeting of the Brotherhood of St. Andrew, we wrestled with that teaching about hating your relatives. Clay said it meant that Jesus wanted his followers and us to put him first, to rank him above every other relationship. And Deacon Donna, in her excellent sermon on the same passage, pointed out that Jesus was using hyperbole to make his point. And so this puzzling passage today started making even more sense. For us today, wealth is relative. In this room, I'm sure that there is a wide range of asset holders, but we all got here this morning, and we will all find something to eat today, and we all have homes of some kind to keep us dry. And we have maintained a beautiful church in which to worship our Lord. The least wealthy individual here is fabulously wealthy compared to some. Honestly gained wealth, whether a little or a lot, is not a bad thing. I think that Jesus was teaching us that God must be our master and wealth must be our servant. We cannot serve God and wealth, he said. God is our master and wealth is our servant if we're doing it right. How can we demonstrate to our wealth that God is our master? Well, here's an easy way. Give some away. Give wealth away. Show wealth and God which one is our master. And in this convoluted parable, I think that Jesus was also telling us to be shrewd with our wealth and how we give it away. Perform due diligence, he might have said if he was a modern American businessman. Check out the recipient and make sure that the wealth is really going to the people we want it to go to. Charity Navigator is a good website to find information about that. They help donors be shrewd with giving away their wealth, like by closely examining hundreds of charities. Charity Navigator is the name. Or the recipient might be a relative or a friend who is in trouble. I found that giving money to someone who struggles with addiction is not shrewd, even when they say they're starving, which they might be. I found it shrewder to pay directly for addiction recovery services. But there's a more fundamental principle here. Is our wealth really ours? Or does every good thing belong to God? Do we mean it when we say, all things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own have we given thee? Do we rejoice not just in John 3:16, but also in John 1:16? From his abundance he has given us grace upon grace. If so, then we have a fiduciary responsibility to do what the owner wants us to do with his or her wealth. And rather than business terms, we can put this in spiritual terms. We are stewards. We shrewdly possess, handle, and give away what has been deposited with us according to the instructions of our Lord, because we are his hands and feet to a world in need. That is stewardship. I said last week that we are stewards of our Lord's dining hall and of his table. Well, we are stewards of the treasury as well. Even the poor refugees I was with could reach out and pick up an even poorer boy. Even Ann and I could get him fed and educated. Even this congregation can feed hundreds of hungry neighbors and put hats and gloves on hundreds of cold heads and hands. We are doing even more. But the quantity of wealth one of us gives is not relative to what any other person gives. The quantity should be relative to what we have been given, to how much God has entrusted to us. And what really, really counts is not quantity, but quality. God is our master, and wealth is our servant. Even then, say this with me if you like, all things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own have we given thee.